She did everything they told her to do, studied hard, got the degree, graduated with honors from a university her parents were proud to mention at dinner parties, took the entry-level job, put in the extra hours, and earned the promotion. She budgets. She eats preps. She has not bought a designer bag in 3 years. She drives a car that is 8 years old and makes a noise she has been quietly ignoring since last winter. She is 31 years old, earns $62,000 a year, and has $400 in savings, not $400,000. 400. 2 blocks away, her mother owns a 3-bedroom home she bought in 1991 for $89,000. That same home is now worth $470,000. Her mother did not do anything particularly brilliant. She simply bought a house when houses were something a single income could reach. That gap between the daughter who followed every rule and the mother who simply existed at the right time is not a story about personal failure. It is a story about a game that changed its rules halfway through and forgot to tell the people still playing. My name is Zik, and today I want to talk honestly about the generation that did everything right and still cannot get ahead. What the numbers actually show, why the standard advice has stopped working, and what you can realistically do inside a system that was not designed with you in mind. Let's start with housing, because this is where the quiet desperation becomes impossible to explain away with budgeting tips. In 1984, the median home price in America was roughly 4 times the median household income. You saved, you sacrificed for a few years, and home ownership was within reach for an ordinary working person with an ordinary working income. Today, that ratio sits at nearly 6 times median household income, and in major cities, it stretches far beyond that. The goalpost did not move slightly. It was picked up and carried to another field entirely. The number of first-time homebuyers collapsed from over 3 million in 2004 to just over 1 million in 2024. That is not a housing shortage. That is a generational lockout dressed up in economic language. And here is the part that the personal finance industry never fully reckons with when homeownership stops looking achievable. Human psychology responds rationally. Research consistently shows that when people lose realistic hope of reaching a major financial goal, they shift spending toward immediate satisfaction, not because they are irresponsible, because they ran the math, and the math told them the truth. Delaying gratification only makes sense when there is something real waiting on the other side of the delay. When the down payment target keeps moving further away every year you save toward it, the decision to spend on what you can actually have today is not a weakness. It is arithmetic. Now let's talk about the debt that arrived before the career even started. Nearly 19 million millennials are carrying student loan debt with an average balance of over $40,000. But the real damage is not the monthly payment, it is the compounding delay that debt creates across every other financial milestone simultaneously. Think about what $40,000 in debt does to a person trying to build a financial life from scratch. It delays the down payment, it delays the car purchase that does not come with a monthly anxiety attack. It delays the decision to start a business, have a child, change careers, or take any risk that requires financial flexibility. More than half of millennial borrowers have delayed major financial decisions because of student loans. Nearly 60% report significant stress and anxiety directly connected to that debt. Here is the quiet cruelty inside that number. The debt was sold as an investment. Go to college, borrow what you need, and the degree will pay for itself through higher lifetime earnings. That was the promise. For many people, the promise has not held. The credential delivered the job, but not the salary. The salary covers the loan payment, but not the down payment. The system extracted full price for a product that delivered partial results, and the person holding the bill has no recourse. This is not a character flaw. It is a structural trap that was marketed as an opportunity. And then there is the employment landscape, which shifted underneath an entire generation without announcing itself. Nearly 3/4 of younger workers now earn income through non-salary arrangements, hourly wages, contract work, gig platforms, commission-based pay. The gig economy promised flexibility and independence. What it delivered, for most people, was income that fluctuates unpredictably and a complete absence of the benefits that previous generations used to build financial stability quietly in the background. No employer-sponsored health insurance, no retirement contributions, no paid leave, no unemployment protection, no predictable baseline to build a budget around. When 80% of gig workers report struggling with an unexpected $1,000 expense, you are not looking at a population of people who failed to plan. You are looking at an income structure that makes planning functionally impossible. You cannot budget for a mortgage payment when you do not know what next month looks like. You cannot plan for children when healthcare is something you pay for out of pocket, and out of pocket means out of the question. The answer is not that people stop planning. The answer is that people survive. Month to month, decision to decision, hope strapped quietly to the idea that somehow things will stabilize in time. If this is resonating with you, take 2 seconds and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Now, here is the part that should stop even the highest earners cold. 64% of people earning over $100,000 a year describe that income not as success, but as the bare minimum for staying afloat. Read that again slowly. People earning 6 figures incomes that previous generations would have considered genuinely comfortable are describing themselves as barely keeping their heads above water. This is not lifestyle inflation. This is not keeping up with anyone. This is the basic cost of a middle-class life having outgrown the income that was supposed to cover it. Housing, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and education have increased in cost so dramatically that even high earners find themselves in what researchers call the illusion of affluence, a good number on paper translating to genuine financial stress in practice. One financial strategist argued recently that when you account for the true cost of housing, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and college savings, the real functional poverty line sits closer to $140,000 in household income. If that framing has any accuracy at all, the majority of this generation is financially struggling in a way that is invisible to every system designed to identify and address financial struggle. Earning too much to qualify for help, not earning enough to actually build anything. Stuck in economic purgatory, officially fine, quietly drowning. The mental health consequences of this position are not a side note. 40% of younger workers report feeling stressed or anxious all or most of the time, with financial pressure ranking as the primary cause. And financial stress does not stay in its lane. It degrades job performance, strains relationships, distorts decision-making, and makes the very financial problems it causes harder to solve. The brain under sustained financial pressure is measurably less capable of the long-term thinking that financial recovery requires. It is a feedback loop with no natural exit. Here is where the wealth gap stops being an abstract concept and becomes a number you can feel. Baby boomers currently control more than 50% of all wealth in America. The total figure sits at approximately $82 trillion, more than twice what Generation X has accumulated and roughly 4 times what millennials have managed to build. Boomers currently hold an estimated $19 trillion in home equity alone. That equity did not come from superior financial discipline. It came from buying assets at prices that were accessible on ordinary incomes and holding them through decades of appreciation. The wealth is real. The mechanism that created it is no longer available to the people who came next. When a millennial tries to buy a home today and finds themselves in a bidding war against someone paying cash from a home equity line, they are not competing on a level surface. They are competing against the compounded result of 30 years of asset appreciation that they had no opportunity to participate in. The race started 30 years before they arrived at the starting line, and here is the dimension that rarely gets named directly. Many people in this generation are simultaneously trying to build their own financial foundation while quietly supporting aging parents who did not save adequately for retirement, student loans from their own education, housing costs that consume a disproportionate share of income, family financial obligations that were supposed to arrive later in life, arriving now all at once, with no runway between them. So, what do you actually do inside a system that was not built for this moment? The honest answer is that the standard playbook needs to be rewritten for the conditions that actually exist, not the conditions that existed in 1985. The first thing to do is separate the controllable from the structural. You cannot personally fix housing prices, student loan policy, or wage stagnation. Spending energy on rage at those realities without acting on the variables you can move is expensive in a way that does not show up on any balance sheet. Identify the levers you actually have access to and pull them consistently. The second thing is to treat income growth as the primary financial objective, not expense reduction. You can only cut so far before the cuts start costing you. Cutting dining out and switching grocery stores are survival tactics, not wealth-building strategies. The constraint that matters most for most people in this generation is not spending it, is income. A side income of $500 a month matters more than eliminating coffee. An extra $3,000 a year in salary matters more than canceling subscriptions. Direct your primary attention to the income side of the equation. Third, use tax-advantaged accounts with the aggression the situation requires. If your employer offers a 401k match and you are not capturing the full match, you are leaving guaranteed return on the table during a period when guaranteed returns are rare. A 50% match on a 6% contribution is a 50% return before the market does anything. That math does not exist anywhere else. Use it. Fourth, build the smallest viable emergency cushion before anything else. $1,000 in accessible cash changes your relationship with risk in ways that are disproportionate to the amount. It stops the cycle of emergency credit card debt that charges 22% interest and quietly erodes every other financial effort you make. $1,000 first. Then build from there. Fifth, stop measuring your progress against a timeline that was designed for a different economy. Your parents bought a home at 28 in a market where homes cost 4 times their income. That benchmark was not wisdom, it was timing. Measuring yourself against it is measuring a different race entirely. Set milestones based on the conditions that actually exist in front of you, not the conditions that existed in a decade you did not live in. Back to where we started. She is 31. $400 in savings. A degree, a job, a budget, and a car that makes a noise she cannot afford to investigate. Every financial rule followed. Every box checked. The problem was never her discipline. The problem was that the rulebook she was handed described a game that no longer exists in quite the same form. The housing ratio shifted. The employment structure shifted. The debt burden arrived before the earnings did. The system changed quietly and then handed her the blame for not keeping up. Understanding that distinction between personal failure and structural change does not solve the problem, but it does something important. It stops the shame from consuming the energy that needs to go toward the actual work. The generation that did everything right and still cannot get ahead is not a generation of people who failed. It is a generation navigating a system that moved its goalposts and called it a level playing field. You are not behind because you did something wrong. You are navigating conditions that are genuinely harder than what came before, and you can still build something real inside those conditions, not by pretending the difficulty does not exist, but by seeing it clearly and moving anyway. If you are getting real value from these conversations, consider subscribing. I make videos like this every week, honest, grounded, and built for people operating in the economy that actually exists. Stay clear, stay moving. I will see you in the next one.